Let's get one thing straight right now. You weren't born angry. No child comes into this world with rage built into their DNA. You were trained. You were wired, moment by moment, through repetition, experience, and environment to react in certain ways. That's the truth. Anger isn't some mysterious beast that shows up in your life without permission. It's a pattern, a habitual response that got so familiar, so normalized, it started to feel like part of your identity. But it's not who you are, it's who you became through conditioning. Think about it. If you grow up watching people explode when things go wrong, guess what you learn? If every time someone disrespected someone else in your household, there was yelling, smashing, cold silence, or emotional shutdown, you didn't just witness that, you absorbed it. Your nervous system took notes. It said, okay, this is what we do when we're disrespected. This is how we protect ourselves. This is how we get heard. And the pattern got laid down. Synapses fired together. And over time, they wired together. That's how it works. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because that's how the brain and body adapt to survive. But here's where most people get stuck. They confuse what they feel with who they are. They say, I'm just an angry person. No, you're not. You're just someone who's been rehearsing anger for a long time. You've repeated it so many times that it became second nature. But if you can learn it, you can unlearn it. And that's the real power. That's where your freedom is. You've got to zoom out and understand this. Emotions are just energy in motion. That's it. They rise, they fall, they pass through the body. But when you cling to them, identify with them, and rehearse them, they stop being temporary. They become your story. And once something becomes your story, you live inside it. You reinforce it. And worse, you defend it. You start collecting evidence to support why your anger is justified. You replay the betrayal, you replay the disrespect, you talk about how people are always testing you, and boom, you're now emotionally addicted to the very state you say you hate. Why? Because your body loves familiarity, even if that familiarity is toxic. Anger releases chemicals. It gives you a rush. It makes you feel powerful, like you've got control, like you're doing something about the injustice. But it's all an illusion, because that same anger that makes you feel strong for a moment is the same anger that eats you alive over time. It corrodes your clarity, it burns your relationships, it blinds you to solutions. And worst of all, it convinces you that you have no other choice. Let me break that lie wide open. You always have a choice. But most people never see it because they never created space between stimulus and response. Something happens, someone says something, someone does something, and boom, you react. Instantaneously. But that reaction isn't conscious. It's programmed, it's rehearsed. It's reactive, not responsive. If you want to never feel angry again, you've got to stop trying to fight anger in the heat of the moment. That's like trying to fix a flat tire at 100 miles per hour on the freeway. It's already too late. The work starts way before that. You've got to pause and ask, where did this pattern start? What was modeled for me? What did I associate with anger? Did I learn that being loud gets me attention? That being angry gets me respect? That exploding means I won't be hurt again? This is the deep work. This is where change begins, not in trying to control your temper, but in understanding what that temper was trying to protect you from. Anger is often a mask for something deeper: fear, sadness, powerlessness, shame. But most people don't want to go there. They want to stay on the surface, yell into the void, and blame the world for triggering them. That's the easy road, but it keeps you stuck, it keeps you reactive, and it makes you a slave to everyone else's behavior. Because here's the thing, if your peace is dependent on other people doing the right thing, you will never be free. If your calm only shows up when people are kind, respectful, and thoughtful, good luck. The world doesn't owe you that. People are going to be rude, they're going to be selfish, they're going to cut you off in traffic, say stupid things, and betray your trust. That's life. You can't control that. But what you can control is the meaning you give it. The pattern you run in response, the internal muscle you build. That's the shift, and it starts with awareness, with taking full ownership, not blaming the past, not blaming your parents, not blaming society, just looking in the mirror and saying, this pattern is mine. And if it's mine, I can change it. That's where your power lives, in responsibility, in rewiring, in repetition. You don't break a lifelong pattern of anger by accident. You break it by design. You wake up every single day and you train your nervous system for peace. You rehearse patience. You wire in new responses. You use your voice, your breath, your body to condition a different state. Because just like you trained yourself to react in rage, you can train yourself to live in calm. It's not about perfection, it's about identity. Who are you choosing to be? What emotional home are you living in? Because you have one, everybody does. And most people default to anger because they never designed a better one. There's a lie you've been telling yourself, one that almost everybody carries around without even realizing it. That lie is this: they made me mad. No, they didn't. Nobody makes you mad. Nobody triggers you unless you let them. That's not a motivational quote. That's not a feel-good idea. It's a cold hard truth. And once you get it, really get it, you stop being a victim to every rude comment, passive-aggressive look, or ignorant opinion that comes flying at you. But let's strip this down to the foundation. A trigger is just a shortcut your brain takes to a past emotion. Something happens. Someone speaks to you with a certain tone, cuts you off, ignores your message, questions your intelligence, and boom, your system lights up. Words were spoken and action was taken. The rest? That's all interpretation. That's meaning. That's you deciding what that moment meant about you and what kind of response it deserves. And that's the trap. You think you're reacting to them, but you're actually reacting to your story about them, your meaning, your conditioning, your emotional blueprint. You can line up 10 people in the same room, give them the same insult, and get 10 different reactions. Why? Because it's never the stimulus. It's the internal wiring that decides what that stimulus means. You're not triggered by what happened if you're triggered by what you made it mean. That means no one owns your emotions unless you hand them the keys. That means your boss doesn't control your inner peace, your ex doesn't hold your mood hostage. That family member who always crosses the line at holidays, they only control your energy if you let them. And that might sting to hear, especially if you've built your identity around being reactive or being the one who calls it out when people are disrespectful. But here's the real power. The moment you take back your permission, you take back your freedom. Let's break it down deeper. Every single time you feel yourself getting heated, tight chest, short breath, jaw clenching, you've got to ask, what did I just agree to emotionally? Did you just buy into the belief that someone else's opinion defines your worth? Did you just accept the story that being challenged is the same as being disrespected? That's the power of awareness. Because the only way someone else's words become your trigger is if they hit something inside you that you haven't healed or examined. They're not putting that button in you. They're just pressing what was already there. And most people, instead of looking inward, point outward. They say, well, I wouldn't have reacted that way if they hadn't done that. But what you're really saying is, I only know how to feel good when the world behaves the way I want it to. That's not power. That's emotional slavery. It's tying your peace to someone else's behavior, someone else's tone, someone else's approval. And that's a prison you build for yourself, brick by brick, every time you decide someone else is in charge of how you feel. The truth is, people are going to test you. That's just life. You're going to meet people who are rude, thoughtless, selfish, loud, dismissive, arrogant, clueless. That's not going away. But what can go away is the illusion that those people have to disturb your peace. That illusion, that story that you need to react, is what's making you tired. It's what's keeping you anxious. It's what's draining you every time you go home after another rough day dealing with people. Because you think they did something to you, but all they did was act out their own programming, and you decided to let it in. You decided it meant something about you. You gave them access to your inner world. That's permission. So how do you stop giving it? You build a different identity. You wake up and decide, nobody gets to hijack my emotions today. Not from a place of arrogance, not from shutting down or becoming numb, but from sovereignty. From knowing you are the gatekeeper of your state. And that's not something you wait to feel, it's something you train. You rehearse it. Just like athletes don't train under perfect conditions, you don't build emotional strength only around polite people. You build it right in the chaos, in the discomfort. In the moment someone says something sideways and you catch yourself, take a breath and respond with intention instead of reaction. That's how you take your power back. That's how you stop being triggered by the same behaviors, the same people, the same moments that used to light you up. You understand that your nervous system is yours. You control the volume. You decide whether or not their energy deserves a response. Because not everything deserves your fire. Not everything deserves a reaction. Sometimes silence is power. Sometimes walking away is strength. Sometimes just smiling because you see through the game, that's mastery. And let's be real, some people are trying to get a reaction out of you. That's their whole game. They live in dysfunction. They feed off drama. And when you give them nothing, when you give them peace, when you keep your power, you starve their ego. You show them that the trigger they were banking on no longer works, that you've upgraded your software, that you've moved from reactive to responsive, and eventually to unbothered. Because being unbothered isn't about pretending. It's not about suppressing your emotions or acting like you don't care. It's about caring so much about your own peace, your own energy, your own mission, that you don't let petty things pull you off track. Most people hear the word affirmations and instantly check out. They picture someone staring in the mirror, whispering sweet nothings to themselves, hoping for some magical change. They think affirmations are soft, fluffy, wishful thinking. They think it's something you say when you've run out of options or need a little emotional sugar to get through the day. That's why most people never get results, because they treat affirmations like decoration, not domination. But when you understand what affirmations really are, when you use them like weapons instead of whispers, everything changes. Affirmations are not cute. They are commands. They are orders to your mind, to your nervous system, to your identity. And if you don't use them with intensity, intention, and repetition, you're not affirming, you're just talking. The human mind is always being programmed, constantly. Either by you or by your environment, either by design or by default. That inner voice you carry, it was built. And for most people, it was built by criticism, by fear, by failure, by the people who told them what they couldn't do, by the experiences that made them feel not enough. Over time, those thoughts weren't just thoughts. They became commands, repeated, emotional, believable commands. That's what creates identity. Not facts, not evidence, but repetition, emotion, and belief. That's the formula. And that's exactly how affirmations work when you do them right. An affirmation is not just a sentence, it's a state changer. It's a deliberate interruption of your current identity followed by a powerful declaration of who you really are or who you're choosing to become. You don't whisper it, you don't mumble it, you own it. You say it from your chest. You say it with your physiology. You say it like your life depends on it. Because if you say it like you don't believe it, you just reinforce the opposite. Most people say affirmations with zero conviction. They say, I am confident, while slouching over, speaking quietly, full of doubt, waiting to feel confident before they believe the words. That's backwards. You don't say affirmations to describe who you are right now. You say them to decide who you're becoming. You don't wait for evidence before you speak them. You create the evidence by declaring them, living them, becoming them. That's the whole point. Affirmations are not for your brain to believe immediately. They are to rewire the brain through emotional repetition until belief becomes inevitable. Let's go deeper. Every thought you think carries weight. It literally rewires your brain. Neurons that fire together wire together. That means when you think something over and over again, your brain starts to automate it. And once it's automated, it becomes a filter, a lens, a script. So if you're constantly affirming unconsciously, I'm always so tired, people are annoying, nothing ever works out for me, I'm just not that kind of person, guess what? You're already doing affirmations just in reverse. You're using affirmations to destroy your power instead of build it. That's why you've got to flip the script, not just once, not just when things are good, but every single day, especially when you don't feel like it. That's when it matters most. Because affirmations are not about describing the weather, they're about controlling the climate. You say, I am calm, not when everything is calm around you, but when the storm is hitting. You say, I am focused, not when it's easy to concentrate, but when distractions are screaming. You say, I am unshakable when the ground is trembling. That's how you anchor yourself. That's how you lead your state to become bulletproof. And the reason it works is simple. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. It just listens. It listens to the tone, it listens to the emotion, it listens to the repetition. If you feed it a message with clarity, certainty, and emotion long enough, it starts to believe it. And once it believes it starts to behave accordingly. Your body follows, your decisions follow, your energy shifts, your identity begins to evolve. But this only works when you stop saying affirmations and start commanding them. You don't need a vision board. You don't need incense. You need commitment. You need intensity. You need to speak to yourself like someone who refuses to be average. You need to condition your nervous system to respond to the sound of your own voice as if it were gospel. That's when you stop hoping and start programming. That's when you stop wishing and start transforming. Affirmations also create alignment. When you say, I am disciplined, and you say it with power, your brain begins to seek ways to act in accordance with that identity. It wants to avoid being out of alignment. So even if you've been lazy in the past, if you affirm, I am disciplined every day with your body, your breath, and your voice, you're planting the seed of a new standard. And standards are what shape lives. Not goals, not dreams, not intense standards. Affirmations done right are not passive. They are aggressive, they're intense, they are a form of emotional training, mental warfare, identity conditioning. And the best part is, you don't need anything external to do it. You don't need permission, you don't need the right playlist or the right lighting, you just need your voice. Your decision, your hunger. You speak it until you believe it until you embody it until nobody can question it, not even you. Everything you feel, every reaction you have, every time you get bothered, triggered, frustrated, it all comes back to one thing, your identity, who you believe you are. Not on paper, not on your resume, not on your Instagram bio, but at your core, deep down, that internal voice, that sense of this is just how I am, that's your emotional home. It's not just your thoughts, it's your baseline. The emotional state you keep defaulting to over and over again, especially under pressure, stress, or conflict. And just like a physical home, it's the place you return to no matter where you've been. See, most people want to change the results, but they never look at their identity. They want to be calm, but they've built an identity around being the one who doesn't take any disrespect. They want peace, but their emotional home is wired for defense, for anger, for being on guard. So every time something shakes them, they run back to what's familiar, and that familiarity is what keeps them stuck. You don't return to your emotional home because it's healthy, you return because it's known. It's what your nervous system has memorized as normal. You've got to realize something deep here. Every time you say, that's just how I am, what you're really saying is, this is the emotional neighborhood I refuse to move out of. But neighborhoods can change. Homes can be renovated. Identities can be rebuilt. You don't have to keep living in the same emotional house you were raised in or conditioned into. But first, you have to see it for what it is, a choice, not a sentence, not a fixed state, a repeated, reinforced emotional decision that became who you think you are. And let's get even more specific. If your identity is rooted in I don't trust people, guess what you feel when someone does something sketchy? Betrayed, hurt, angry. But not because of what they did, because it aligned with your internal model of the world. You were already expecting it. At your emotional home, suspicion, protection, walls up. If your identity is, I'm always the one who gets walked on, what happens when someone overlooks you in a meeting or speaks over you? You feel disrespected, small, unseen, because you're running back to the home you built, even when the situation doesn't objectively deserve that level of emotion. Your nervous system says, here we go again. This is familiar. It's not about the moment. It's about the meaning you've been living in. And that meaning comes from identity. The people who don't get shaken easily, it's not because their lives are easier. It's because they built a different home. They chose a different baseline. Their internal thermostat is set to calm, strength, clarity. So when life heats up, they don't boil, they regulate. They return to what they've trained. It's not magic, it's conditioning. Identity isn't found, it's built. But most people are living in an emotional squat house. It's chaotic, no structure, full of past pain and mental clutter, and they wonder why they can't find peace. They wonder why they're so easily thrown off by other people. But how could you feel steady when the home you keep returning to is unstable? You can't meditate your way out of it. You can't journal your way out of it. You've got to rebuild it. Brick by brick. word by word, action by action, and that starts with deciding what's the new address I want to live at emotionally. Maybe it's I am calm under pressure, maybe it's I lead with compassion, maybe it's nothing shakes me. Whatever it is, it has to become your emotional residence, and you don't get there by visiting it once, you get there by moving in. You get there by conditioning it so frequently that it starts to feel more real than the chaos you were used to. You flood your nervous system with it. You affirm it. You act in alignment with it, and slowly that new emotional state becomes your new identity, your new baseline, your new home. But let's be honest, some people are addicted to their emotional home even though it's destroying them. They like the drama, they like the fight, they like feeling wrong because it gives them fuel, it makes them feel alive. But it's costing them peace, it's costing them clarity, and it's keeping them at the mercy of every person they come into contact with. That's not freedom, it's disguised as personality. You've got to ask yourself, where do I emotionally live? Not where you want to live, not what you post about online, but where you actually reside when life tests you, when someone cuts you off, when someone disagrees with you, when someone disappoints you. Do you return to grace or do you go right back to bitterness? Do you anchor into strength or do you default to resentment? That's your home. And the truth is, you've lived there for so long you might not even realize it's toxic, you've normalized it. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because it's been your story doesn't mean it needs to be your future. You can burn it down, you can level the foundation, you can build something that actually serves you. Not just when things are easy, but especially when things are hard. Because your identity isn't tested in the light, it's forged in the fire. Who you choose to be when everything's shaking, that's the blueprint. That's the real you, that's the emotional home you've got to start reinforcing moment by moment, reaction by reaction, breath by breath. There's a story you've been telling, maybe not out loud, maybe not even consciously, but it's there, running in the background, shaping your reactions, your emotions, your identity, your limitations. It's the narrative that you've rehearsed so many times, but you don't even question it anymore. It's become truth to you. But let's be clear, just because something feels true doesn't mean it is true. It just means you've repeated it enough times to believe it. That's the cage. That's the prison. Not the past itself, but the meaning you gave it. Not the person who hurt you, but the interpretation you never rewrote. And until you change that internal dialogue, until you flip the script, you will keep living inside the boundaries of that story. You want to know why some people never grow past their triggers? Why they keep reacting the same way year after year, even though they say they're working on themselves? Because they're too loyal to their story. They're more committed to being right about their pain than being free from it. They've built an identity around the narrative that says people always disrespect me, or no one ever sees my value, or I always get taken advantage of, and every time something happens that could be interpreted differently, they still filter it through that old lens. They default to the familiar script, not because it's empowering, but because it's known. And the mind craves what's familiar, even if it hurts. But that story, that's the real source of your anger. It's not what people do, it's what their actions activate inside your narrative. You don't get upset because someone made a mistake. You get upset because in your story, that mistake means I'm not respected, or here we go again, nobody cares about me. See the pattern? The story, it's a weapon you keep using against yourself. And the more you tell it, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the more you find ways to prove it. That's how the cage gets built, not with bars, but with beliefs. Not with facts, but with repetition. If you want to feel free, if you want to stop being bothered by everyone and everything, you've got to break that pattern at the root. You've got to interrupt the narrative and question every word of it. Because most of the time, the story isn't even yours. It was handed to you, passed down, programmed into you by people who were reacting to their story. Your parents, your teachers, your first heartbreak, that one coach who said you weren't good enough. They weren't speaking objective truth. They were speaking from their pain, and you took it on as identity. Now, you walk around with that script running in your nervous system, and every time life tests you, you pull out that old story like a well-worn script and perform it again. See? This always happens to me. It's the voice of a prisoner who thinks the walls are real. But the walls aren't real. They're emotional. They're linguistic. The moment you change the story, the cage dissolves. But most people don't want to let go of the story because the story gives them significance. It gives them something to point to when things go wrong. And that's the trap. That's the addiction. You're not addicted to anger. You're addicted to the story that says anger keeps you safe. And let's not pretend this story is just mental. It's physical. It's in your breath, your posture, your energy. You carry it in your shoulders, in your tone, in how you walk into a room, and how you respond to feedback, in how you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. The story isn't just something you think, something you live. You've embodied it so deeply that it feels like part of you. But it's not you. It's a costume you've been wearing. And the second you decide to take it off, everything shifts. But it won't come easy because stories like to stay alive. They want evidence. They want drama. They want moments to justify their existence. So the next time someone disrespects you, the story will scream, "See, I told you." And that's your moment. That's your chance to respond differently, to break the loop, to say, maybe this isn't about me. Maybe this isn't personal. Maybe I don't need to reinforce this old pattern again. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's choosing freedom over familiarity, power over pattern, peace over the need to be right. You got to become the editor of your life, not just the actor. You've got to start rewriting scenes. You've got to question the script. Who wrote this? When did I agree to this? Does this serve who I'm becoming, or does it keep me in who I've been? And if it doesn't serve you, burn it, replace it, upgrade it. Start saying things like, I am not available for chaos anymore, or my peace is not negotiable, or I don't chase closure, I create clarity. Those are stories too, but they're stories that expand you, not shrink you. Stories that liberate you instead of locking you up. The real shift happens when you stop using your past as a prediction and start using it as a lesson. When you stop letting your wounds write the next chapter. When you stop letting that voice in your head repeat the same emotional monologue every time life doesn't go your way. That's when you reclaim authorship. That's when you stop being a character in your own life and start being the creator. Because you've got two choices every day: reinforce the story or rewrite it. Stay in the cage or walk out the door that's been open this entire time. Most people live like emotional puppets, tied to strings they don't even realize are there. They walk through life reacting to everything. Someone says something rude and their blood boils. Someone cuts them off in traffic and they spiral. Someone doesn't text back and they go into a whole narrative about being ignored or not enough. They keep chasing the trigger, hoping that if they can just eliminate the noise, the people, the problems, then they'll feel peace. But that's not power. That's dependency. That's handing your emotional state to everything and everyone outside of you. And as long as your internal world is a slave to the external world, you'll always be one message, one mistake, one mood swing away from being completely thrown off center. The truth is, your emotional state is not something you find, it's something you lead. It's not something you wait for, it's something you command. And the shift, the real shift, happens the moment you decide to stop chasing comfort and start choosing your state no matter what's happening around you. That's when the game changes. That's when you go from being reactive to unshakable, from being triggered to being trained. You've got to understand something most people never learn. Your state is your superpower. Everything you say, do, think, and create flows from it. The quality of your life isn't based on your circumstances. It's based on the state you're in when you face them. When you're in a powerful state, nothing feels too big. Problems become puzzles. Setbacks become setups. But when you're in a weak state, everything feels overwhelming. Small problems look like giants. Inconveniences feel like personal attacks, and instead of leading your life, you're surviving it. So how do you lead your state? It starts with ownership. You stop blaming, you stop pointing fingers, you stop waiting for peace to arrive from outside. You decide that your state is yours. and that no matter what someone says, no matter how chaotic the world gets, you own the one thing no one can ever take from you: your internal power. The moment you feel yourself slipping into anger, frustration, resentment, you interrupt the pattern and you breathe. You shift your body, you speak differently, you move differently, because your state lives in your physiology, not just your thoughts. The body doesn't lie. When someone is angry, you can see it before they speak. Shoulders tense, jaw clenched, breathing shallow. That's not just emotion, it's pattern physiology. If you want to break the emotional loop, you have to break the physical loop. You don't wait until the emotion passes. You shift your body and force the change. You stand taller, you open your chest, you breathe deeper, you move with energy, and suddenly the emotion starts to shift, not because the problem disappeared, but because you showed up differently. Most people think they need the right conditions to feel strong. They need silence, agreement, validation, but if you can only be at peace when everything is perfect, you're not free. You're fragile. Real power is when you stay grounded in the middle of chaos. When you hold your frame when others lose theirs, when you walk into tension and don't become it, that's emotional leadership, that's internal dominance. And that's the skill most people avoid because it's uncomfortable to build. It's easier to say, they made me mad, but the second you say that, you've lost, because now they are in control. Now, they lead your state, and you're just along for the ride. This is where affirmations become weapons, not soft phrases, but sharp decisions. You say things like, I lead my state. You breathe that in, you feel it in your chest. You don't wait for peace, you create it. You don't wait to be understood, you understand yourself. You don't wait for life to get easy, you get stronger. That's the difference between living triggered and living trained. You stop rehearsing reactions and start conditioning power. And let's be clear, leading your state doesn't mean ignoring your emotions. It means owning them, feeling them, processing them, but not becoming them. You can feel anger without being angry. You can feel pain without collapsing into suffering. So it separates emotional maturity from emotional chaos. You recognize the emotion, you see the trigger, and then you choose your response based on the identity you've built, not the impulse you've been repeating. Because triggers are always going to be there, people are always going to do something, life is always going to throw you off schedule. But when you're trained, when you've built the muscle of emotional leadership, those things don't take you out. They don't decide your energy. They don't dictate your reaction. You decide, you lead. You return to your chosen state, not because it's automatic, but because it's conditioned. Every time you choose calm over chaos, you're training your nervous system. Every time you catch the reaction and pause instead, you're laying a new neural pathway. Every time you say, I lead this moment, you're strengthening the emotional core most people never even build. And eventually, it stops being a struggle. It becomes who you are. You stop being someone who tries to stay calm and you become someone who just is. Not by accident, but by decision, repetition, and practice. That's where the shift really happens, not in the quiet moments, but in the ones where your ego screams, your fear rises, and your old patterns beg to be followed. And you look them in the eye, breathe deep, hold your frame, and say, not today, I lead now. That's how you take your power back. That's how you stop being at the mercy of other people's energy. That's how you stop chasing triggers and start choosing your truth. That's how emotional freedom is built, not in comfort, but in command. Not in silence, but in decision. Not in the absence of triggers, but in your mastery over them. So here's the truth, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. Your peace, your power, your freedom, they've never been about other people. It was never about them. Not the ones who hurt you, not the ones who triggered you, not the ones who didn't see you. It was always about you, about how you respond, about what you believe, about the identity you live from, the emotional home you keep returning to, the story you keep returning, and the state you keep choosing or not choosing. Because the people who live unbothered aren't lucky, they're not passive, they're intentional. They've trained, they've burned the old scripts. They've rewired their patterns. They don't hand out their power to the world and then complain when it's mishandled. They own it. Every moment, every breath, every time life throws chaos at them, they stand grounded. Not because life is easy, but because they decided to lead themselves no matter what. And that decision, that moment, that shift, it starts now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now, with the words you say, the identity you step into, the standards you raise, and the state you choose. Affirm it, own it, condition it, be it. Because when you stop reacting and start leading, when you stop chasing peace and start embodying it, when you start waiting to be unbothered and start deciding it, that's when everything changes.